Welcome to the Let's Talk Duplicates webinar. Today today we would like to help you to avoid these types of denials when possible. We'll talk more about this as we go. I'm Tom Ryan with Provider Outreach and Education. I'll be your presenter. Today I'm joined by Mary from my team who will help with the questions you place in the chat. She might be able to provide some answers. She might be able to give you some additional information. So keep watching that chat. What are we going to talk about today? Well, today we're going to explore duplicate denials to help bring this claim denial down. Duplicates continues to be one of our highest denials on an overall basis. So we really do want to bring it down. I do want to start off with some basic information. Now, the reason that I'm going to define duplicates and kind of go through that piece before I even get into the explanation, I did have at least 6 of you indicate that you are brand new to Medicare and you need a starting point. This is one of your starting classes. So to do that, I can't just kind of leave them out there. I really do want to get into a definition, kind of help them through that process. We're going to then look at the data and what are we talking about with the data. And last, we'll give you some resources and hopefully that will help you. As a reminder, there are some disclaimers at the end of the presentation, and we would encourage you to look at those disclaimers. Let's again start off with answering those questions for those of you that are new to Medicare, for those of you that indicated you needed a basic review, some basic general information like that. First, thanks for attending, and I do want to make sure that you get what you need. So please stop and put information into the chat if I miss something. One other thing, when we start to define stuff, Mary and I, a lot of times we talk in what's called acronyms. You may call it the alphabet soup of Medicare. So if there's an acronym that I do not define, that you want further clarification that you're not getting, put that in the chat and Mary will help you get that acronym defined. Okay. So that's a little bit about it. Let's start with some definitions. The biggest thing that we have to do is, what does Medicare consider a duplicate claim? Now keep in mind, this definition is not something that we at WPS have the right to interpret. On the other hand, what we do is we have to follow the information given to us in the Medicare manuals. In this case, it's in the Medicare Claims Processing Manual, and it's in Chapter 1 in the General Billing Requirements. It's in Section 120, and you'll see that link provided to you on the bottom of the slide. So you guys can go ahead and jump out there, take a look at that, read that if you want. I'm going to summarize it for you. The claim or line contains the same or similar information. This means that Medicare is doing an exact duplicate or a suspected duplicate. Okay, so exact or suspected. When we look for information, what are we looking for? First, the provider who billed the service. Or if it is a service subject to a capitated or a daily rate, such as an evaluation and management service, it's 2 providers, 2 individual people with the same specialty but the same tax ID. That's considered the provider who billed the service. The patient. Is your patient information the same? Yes or no. So you can't duplicate against a different patient. Data service and procedure codes. Now, sometimes a procedure code will not duplicate and is not allowed to duplicate based on this instruction when there's a modifier appended. So what we're looking for is similar, the same. What are we doing there? Okay. So the automated system edits, which are what these are designed for, they identify the duplicates. We do not. What happens is, once an automated edit is decided upon or hits, it sends out a rejection, a denial, or a return to provider. We'll talk more about those terms in just a little while. But basically it's, oops, we can't do that. Basically, it appears to already be in the Medicare system, whether it's currently processed, in processing, paid even. Those are all things we're going to look at. Now, there was a couple of people within their questions that did give me CMS references in the manual, which require us as a MAC to process a claim as a duplicate. If you've gotten a CMS reference from a manual, there's not anything I can do to override that. CMS is indicating to us as the claims processor, this isn't an overridable duplicate. It's not something that's going to go away or change or be different. On the other hand, when you have to go back to that manual requirement and see what CMS indicates the contractor can do. So could you file an appeal for medical necessity? If CMS doesn't indicate that, we can't override the edit. So we'll talk more about that in just a little bit. The situations, the things you could possibly look at. We'll talk more about that later on. All right, so again, and I kind of briefly mentioned this, but I do want to make it clear. When we look at edits, we do a variety of different types of audits and edits. So for duplicates, when we look at the edit, we have the exact one. This is a hard-coded system maintainer edit. So we, as your Medicare administrative contractor or MAC, don't code these in. The system maintainer does code these in. The system maintainer works with one or two systems, and we'll get to those in just a little while. This is not something we as a MAC can override. There's also something called a suspected duplicate. These again are hard-coded, but they do have the potential for the Medicare administrative contractor or claims processor to override them. What they're doing is looking for similar or like claims and items. So this claim looks like this one without a modifier, so we think it is. Or this claim looks like this one, but it's for a different provider, so we don't think it is. Those are the types of things that the edits are automatically built for. Somebody asked about rejection and submission. This can happen. This is not necessarily a system edit for duplicate though. What that means is there's some kind of issue or problem before it even hits the system. So if you're submitting a claim electronically, we can actually reject that claim before it hard codes into the system. So what if it does actually go to the system? What do we do? Well, we do have to determine, how was this a duplicate? Why was this a duplicate? Because we have to give that to you on your remittance notice. Okay. So we could say to you, this was paid on another claim. That actually means that Medicare issued the payment to the provider or the patient. Someone asked me about when it would be issued to the patient. The person asking the question did represent a facility, and they told us that they billed on a UB04 or an 837I. In your case, it wouldn't be paid to the patient. On the other hand, if you build on a CMS 1500 or 837P, if you do not accept assignment, which means you accept the Medicare criteria and all of those different items, it will be paid to a patient, and that's where that comes in. It can be in processing, and that's as simple as it sounds. It's currently in process, and you're sending in another claim, a tracer claim, etc., but we haven't even finished processing yet. Medicare has not issued an adjudication, and it is not required to until 30 days after the claim submits to us. Now, a lot of people get this confused and say, well, why is it in processing after 14 days when I submitted it electronically? That's the payment floor, and that's the first day we can pay it. And again, the payment floor is 14 days. The clean claims processing, though, occurs within 30 days. Same thing, for a paper claim, the payment floor is 28 days, but the clean claim processing must be completed within 30 days. So keep in mind, when I say clean claim, that means it didn't go to development, it didn't do anything else, it's not hitting anything, waiting on something from the provider. Once development is issued, then again, those timeframes go out. So we want to make sure that everything you do when you're looking at items, especially tracer claims or status checks, whatever you're doing, occurs well after 30 days, because we have 30 days to process all clean claims. We do have times when we'll say process on. And this is another type of duplicate. Now, the reason that this is not paid on another claim is it might not be paid, but it was processed. Give you an example. There's a primary insurance, and that insurance paid it in full. Well, we did process it. It's not that we didn't process it, we just didn't have any liability. Or it's the beginning of the year and the Part B deductible has been unmet, so this service fully applies to that deductible. Again, it's not that it's not processed. Okay. And then there's duplicate charge, which is on the same claim, and a duplicate paid to another provider, which means could be a once in a lifetime benefit, or we've already paid it, we're not going to pay it again. It could also be something with a co-surgery without a modifier, or an assistant at surgery without a modifier. Yeah. Unless there's bundles that will actually say, hey, This is a duplicate because we've already paid out this service. Now, in this case, it will specifically reference on your remittance advice that it's a bundle versus all the other codes. And each one is coded significantly, and it's important to understand. And you want to look at your duplicate remit notices, right? Did you guys catch that? The remit notices to tell this. So what are you looking for? Well, that's our next slide. When you look at them, start with a remarks code, and that's your CARC. And that's going to be a CO or a PR. Great. That's the patient destination code. That's not really the important part. The important part is the numbers. 18 is exact duplicate claims and services. If you see that on there, that means somewhere within our system there is an exact duplicate. 97 means it's included in an adjudicated service. So paid somewhere else, something else is going on. What we do then is provide you with a remarks code. So we have a reason in a remarks code. And in the remarks code, or the RORC, what you're going to see is there's no appeal rights except duplicate claims and service issues. This service was included in a claim that's been previously paid or adjudicated. So you see, the reason I put this one in here is it says except for, then you could. Okay. This is a duplicate. The second one, the N522, is a duplicate of a claim process or to be processed as a crossover claim. It's coming from another entity. So you want to make sure that you're aware of what you may see. Okay. Remember, patients do not receive their Medicare summary notice. So you get a remittance advice, they get a Medicare summary notice. At the same time, you get your remittance advice. We will send you something when we process your claims. Patients do not get their summary notices for 120 days. If it's a no pay summary notice, they're sent once every 120 days. The reason for that is they're no pay, they're not getting any money, it's just informational for them, right? So what does that mean for you as a provider representative? Could you actually be billing them before they get their Medicare summary notice? Yes, happens all the time. So I wanted you guys to be aware of that. We did have 3 or 4 questions saying, why doesn't the patient know that this claim went as a duplicate, that they have whatever rights they may have? Well, the answer is they haven't even received their summary notice yet. And if they're not techno-savvy and checking Medicare.gov and logging in and looking at the claim status, they may not be aware of it. So I just hopefully answered that question, but if you all need more on that, please put that into the chat for me so I can get you a little bit better or a little bit more information. All right. What are we looking for when you go to fix this stuff? Well, first, check if there is a modifier that will work. Please, please, please look at the documentation. Read through the documentation before appending a modifier. Yes, it will override a duplicate or other things, but can also be incorrectly paid. So verify an anatomical modifier is a great example. Is there a right side, a left side, finger or a toe modifier? Whatever you want to do there, verify that one of those would fit. Verify the description of the claim. So don't append a modifier without reading the description of of the procedure, not necessarily the claim. Read the description of the procedure. What does it say? Okay, that's what you want to make sure of, because you can't always append a modifier and say, well, I'm going to verify this out when the procedure code says it applies to everything. It applies to right and left. It makes it bilateral automatically. Also, if you check the system and you've done all your system and you've done all your work and you're trying to guess whether or not our system, the Medicare system, likes a procedure code with a modifier, you are not asking a coding question. You're saying, does your system like this? Will your system allow this? This is not, I want to code together. Okay. You can contact customer service. Now you notice I said this isn't a coding question, this isn't a coding question, this isn't a coding question, because you need to ask a system related question, not a coding related question. You can always do this via email as well. Either way is perfectly fine. I always encourage everyone, when we look for duplicate claims, check for overlapping claims. So go back to the original claim and see, was there an inpatient claim that's affecting your outpatient claim or your service claim? And that means that, guess what? We're not going to make a payment. You're actually going to have to bill a different entity. Now, we do offer different classes on billing different entities, so I just want to stop with that one there. But if you have questions, put that in chat for me. You can always check for bundles. Now, some of you may have heard the National Correct Coding Initiative edit or NCCI. That's one form of a bundle. The Medicare Physician Fee Schedule Database for Professional Services has another form of a bundle on it. It's two different forms of a bundle. And what it does is says these services are incorporated into this payment. So then when you're like, well, I got this payment, but I didn't get anything for the following services. So you send in the following services. We will actually tell you they're duplicate based on that bundle because we've already paid them in another claim. So there's some different things going on there that happen with that one. Now, there are times when, yes, there is an appeal, but you do want to check your remittance advice and you're going to look for the MA01. Okay, the MA01 in the remarks code. Now, the reason that that's so important is that tells you, yes, you can do an appeal. So a couple questions came in regarding ambulance services and how we know that those services are matched to duplicate. Well, a couple of things occur in my mind, and I'll talk more about this in just a little bit, but EMTs are not allowed to diagnose. Therefore, we can't use a diagnosis to avoid duplicates. Okay, so if they're not allowed to diagnose and they're going from residence to hospital, and then later that day going from residence to hospital, there's no programming edit that can be put in place to make it allow. And that's why sometimes an appeal does have to be done. Um, we were also asked, is there a simple fix? I'm going to use the term clerical error reopening or SIR for a simple fix. So this means, hey, I could have put a modifier on there. I didn't. I don't want to have to wait the time frames for all the, appeals or all of that. I can go in and do a clerical error reopening on a Part B claim. A Part B by line of business for CMS is a 1500 claim form or an 837P. Now, on the other hand, could I go into the direct data entry system and enter into a Part A claim, which is in FIS, and that claim is built on a UB04 or an 837I? And the answer is yes, but you want to make sure you check the tape-to-tape field. Okay, so a clerical error reopening can be used. A clerical error reopening is another option you have. Simply rebuilding the claim would be an option you have. It all just depends on what happened along with filing an appeal. The extra step or the extra option would be for those that bill on the UB04 or the 837P. And when we talk briefly about the tape-to-tape field, because I did have some FIS correction questions based on the tape-to-tape field, so I want to remind you that in the tape-to-tape field, there's an indicator that tracks whether the claim was successfully posted to the common working file. An X in this field means the claim did not post to the common working file. In this case, you cannot adjust the claim. You must submit a new claim. If there is a blank in this field, then you can adjust the claim through DDE. If you do not have DDE access and you're not sure whether that tape-to-tape field has the X in it, you do need to contact customer service. All right. So lots of different things going on there. Hopefully I got through some basic information. We're going to keep going with this. One of the other situations that is more common, especially recently, is AI resubmits. Now this is artificial intelligence, and what artificial intelligence is doing is going out and looking and saying this wasn't paid. Therefore, we resubmit it every 30 days, or therefore we resubmit it every 8 days, 7 days, 6 days, 5 days, whatever your programming tells it the AI to do. The problem with the AI is that if you set it wrong, it's going to resubmit claims that may have been paid. Also, did you have it do the research to determine whether it was not paid because it was applied to deductible, because it was paid by a primary insurance, because there's no Medicare liability on that claim? If you didn't, then you're actually creating more duplicates. So I'm not saying AI can't help you, definitely could help you. You want to make sure though that you're fitting these scenarios that we talked about in so that you're not costing Medicare money as we continue to build and monitor these edits to make sure they're working correctly, in which case cost money. Time is money. So lots of stuff to go on with artificial intelligence, okay? So again, set it after the payment floor. But again, let's not just set it after the payment floor, let's set it after a clean claim development, and that's 30 days. Set for no payment also If you haven't looked at that, that is one of the biggest reasons that we have an issue with this. If you would go there. All right, I'm going to stop for just a moment and ask Mary if we have any questions.
There are no questions, Tom.
Okay, perfect. So let's talk about the data next. We all love to hear, what's going on, why is this happening, any of that type of information. So, what is the data that I use for this program? Here's where it began. First, I went in and said, I don't want data from just one of the two processing systems. I want data from both of them. So when we say the FIS system, we're talking about claims, whether they are benefits for inpatient care or outpatient care. They're all billed on a UB04 claim form or the 837I HIPAA standard transaction. When we talk about MCS, which is the multi-carrier system, these are all billed on the CMS 1500 claim form or the 837P HIPAA standard transaction. Okay, so two different claims processing systems, and I said I don't want to differentiate these two systems. But you've already heard me mention once before when we talked about the actions that one of these two systems has additional actions, and that was FIS. Remember, direct data entry can go through those different pieces of information. So we want to make sure everyone is aware of where this information is coming from, because as we go through, some of the duplicates are going to look different, and you will see that one of the systems, FIS, has a smaller number of duplicates than does MCS. Okay, so hopefully that all makes sense. Now, as a reminder, when we're talking about the processing systems, FIS correction can be entering the system through the direct data entry and correcting the claim. On the other hand, MCS does not have that. You have to enter the system in the portal, which is the WPS Secure Net Access portal, and do a clerical error reopening to correct the claim. So because the systems do function differently, I really wanted to make that as clear as possible. So what were the parameters I set? Just anything, hey, pull everything. First of all, that would be a huge amount of data to try to sort through, and it's almost too big. So what I did is said, okay, I want to look at the last quarter of 2025. I'm doing this in the first quarter of 2026, so makes sense. Let's look at the last quarter of 2025. I also then got an update date of 1/14/26. This is what our team used. It's nothing to do with anything to do with you guys. It's just this is when the latest data is affected. Why does that matter? Because when I pulled the data, what happens if appeals came in or something else occurred after the fact, that would still be incorporated as a duplicate into this data. And then I said, I don't really mind the data service. I really do want to look at when was the claim sent. Let's just use that. I could have done a data service to narrow it down more, but I just chose not to. No reason on that. So I do want to remind you again that the data shows this is a high level denial. And so what it first does is we are going to look at the FIS data, which is the UB04 or the 837 I institutional transactions. And so it says, okay, we did reject, which means technical denial. We aren't going to pay it. This is not a medical necessity denial. This means it's never going to be paid. It's a rejection. We rejected $116,500. 66 lines, 30 providers, and 48 patients. Relatively low amount. We then moved on and said, okay, return to provider, which means go in, check the tape to tape field, and either submit a new claim or fix it directly in the system if you can. Okay, that was a little over $1 million. So that one was much higher in terms of this system. Okay. Now I did find it interesting to take a look at it a little bit further, and what I wanted to do was to find out if it was definite, possible, previously claimed, all those things that we went through. And so by using these codes within the FIS system, and it's a 5-digit code, you guys can look them up if you're using DDE, I was able to do that. So what I did is I put the first two or the highest two on here, leaving the remainder down below in your notes section. Okay. So possible duplicate previously sent 686,364. All right. Duplicate of a claim previously sent 516,723. And then it goes into the further breakdowns. And the reason that I did this is because we do want to look a little bit further on. And I want to let you know that the last denial in your notes section, or one of the last denials, will say RAC, or Recovery Audit Contractor. What this is another contractor, not us, who actually is reviewing the claim and determine that there was a duplicate based on that. Okay, hold on one second. I apologize. I'm going to go on mute. Okay, sorry about that. I didn't think y'all wanted to hear me cough. So let's get back into this. The second system uses a different terminology. So while we called it an RTP, or return to provider, in the FIS system, we call that unprocessable in MCS. Where we called it rejected in FIS, we call it denied in MCS. Don't get too hung up on those different terms, right? And I want you to point out that the denied system in MCS, because look at how much it is. It's $214 million. This is a very high level denial. Now, we're not saying that all of these denials are incorrect. Some of them are correct. But should we really have 500,881 lines for 197,000 providers, a little over 197,000 for 417,000 patients? That's what we look at when we look at this. That's why we continue to do these. Okay, that's why we continue to do these webinars. We continue to do various educations, because this is such a high volume um, in terms of that information. So again, when we look at it, we do look at the different types. Duplicate paid on a different claim. We know this is already paid. Your charge has been paid, so something didn't happen. Okay. Duplicate charges is next, and that one is exactly what it sounds like. It's not paid somewhere, but it is somewhere out there. If you look towards the bottom in the speaker notes, in that notes section, you'll see that the third one is duplicate charges now in processing, and that is over $9 million. Now with MCS, you cannot fix a claim until it adjudicates, until it processes. That means that if it goes unprocessable, you have to submit a claim again, and it's going to act in the system like it's never been submitted and it's a brand new claim. You can adjust with clerical error reopening, but it's already in processing and you can't adjust a claim that's in processing. Then you do move on through the other ones that are down there. So what we really want to point out is, again, duplicates we processed are 333,523, and again, this is in your notes section. This is processed, not paid. It's not paid on a different claim. It's just literally processed. Well, again, what happened there? Could have went to deductible, could have been primary paid insurance, it could have been a variety of other factors. So please make sure that you are aware of some of these basic ones that we're hoping we can have you guys kind of stop and look at and maybe avoid in the future. Okay. Resources come next. So we're going to move on into the resources, and we're going to try to get you through some of these different help sections, and we'll talk a little bit more about some information. Also, this is where the question and answers fall. Okay. So check the status comes first. Well, that seems very simple, but if you remember, especially in the MCS world, the CMS 1500 or 837P world, there's a third highest volume is already in process. So why are you submitting a claim? Now that's where AI sometimes comes in. They're just submitting every so many days. Also, another one that comes in with that, and it's in process, clearinghouses, or people you are contracted with to submit your claims. If they don't look at that and they're submitting every 7 days, they're automatically making that outside of what we can even process a claim. Remember, I talked about the payment floor, and that's the number of days we have to hold before we can process. But let's not just forget the payment floor. Let's move on to another step and say, okay, we have 30 days. So if they're submitting and they're submitting at 7, then they're submitting 7, 14, 21, and 28 before we're required to process the claim. You created 3 duplicates before we were even required to process the claim. So it's really important to look for that. When we talk about checking the status, we also really will encourage you check the deductible. Check to see if another insurance paid it and Medicare has no liability. Again, check to make sure bundling doesn't apply. Now, bundling can be like the National Correct Coding Initiative, which says this procedure code and this procedure code can't be billable together, and we're going to pay you for this one, but not this one. It could also be on the Medicare physician fee schedule, which simply says when a professional bills this code, it automatically bundles into something else. It's just a B on there. And guess what? That one, not something we can override or do anything with. The third one would be inpatient bundling, and we talked about that as we called it overlapping claims before. It's the same thing. Priority will always be given to an inpatient claim versus an outpatient claim. So if we have an inpatient claim for a skilled nursing facility, for a hospital of any type, your claim will bundle into it. Depending on the type, it will have different terminologies. You may hear the 3-day, 1-day payment window. You may hear skilled nursing facility consolidated billing, amongst other terminologies for that. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about modifiers. Again, step back, take a look at your documentation. Make sure that that modifier is fully supported for use within your documentation. If that is not the case, then you cannot use that modifier. Now, do we accept all modifiers on all claim types? And the answer is no. One of the biggest questions, and I continue to get this, is I have two ambulance transports. They occurred on the same day, and I went from the patient's residence to the hospital. They were both for an ALS level 2, which is an advanced life support level 2. It means you did certain things during the transport. So the patient went in the morning, they came home, they were discharged, they fell, now they have to go back. They're going to go to the same hospital. It's going to have the same mileage code, it's going to have the same miles on it, it's going to look like the same ALS. The Medicare system automatically says, hold up, hold up, hold up, this is the exact same thing. And that's where that remarks code that we said that said, hey, except if it's the duplicate, you can appeal this. We do require you to do an appeal. Again, I want to make that clear. For an ambulance claim, we would require you to do the appeal. We want the documentation to show that it's the same date of service, however, at different times, and that they could not have anticipated it. Now, that can all be within the run sheet. That's just an example. Okay, so we want to make sure that we have that that in place. That's our system and how our system works. Somebody asked about other contractors and do they use ambulance with modifier 76. That's up to every contractor to decide on an individual basis. CMS does not force or make that happen. Instead, they say that's a contractor discretion. WPS does not. So that's just one example that I got a couple questions in. I thought I'd throw it out there for you. Also, when you look at the modifier, one thing I really want you to stop and do is read the description of the modifier and the description of the procedure code. If they do not match, you will not get a duplicate denial. You will cause another issue, which could be an unprocessable or a different type of system problem. It could be a rejection, could be a denial, variety of things. So for instance, if the procedure code description says this is a bilateral procedure, and then you append an RT saying it was only done on the right side, the procedure code doesn't allow for that. So now you've got a modifier procedure code mismatch, and that's not going to work either. So then you go to resubmit it, and guess what happens? It's duplicating. That's where I said, hey, if you really come up down to that final question and you're not sure, give us a call. Ask, does your system let this procedure code go through with this modifier? Does your system do that? That's what you want to ask Medicare. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about line denials. Some people have said to us, hey, we see this, we understand, but we don't really get it. Well, let me explain. On a claim, we can process an entire claim, adjudicate the entire claim. That claim can have denials within it for certain lines. Now, these are outpatient services, not inpatient services, outpatient services. And then on top of that, we can look a little bit further. So when you go to resubmit the claim, don't send all the claim lines again. Okay? So we want to make sure that we're doing that type of situation. And that's what happens, and that's what a line denial is. Just make sure that it's not paid in a claim somewhere else. It's looking exactly the same. And by somewhere else, I mean on the same claim. That's when your line denial is going to occur. Now, when you go to resubmit them, if you need to resubmit them for whatever reason, don't resubmit all the lines. So if you have four and only one is denied, you want to just resubmit the one. You don't want to hit the extra edits and get the extra three line denials, which you didn't need in the first place because they were already processed and you knew that. Make sure you do that. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about lab services. And this is one that we don't have a whole lot of control over. And the reason that I bring this up is because it will deny as a duplicate service. It's going to deny it or as an unbundled service, which again, both are form of duplicate. What it's saying is, okay, a lab service was done and it's a lab panel. Then another order comes in and on that lab panel, this test was already performed. Medicare will not pay for the individual test when it's already performed on a panel because you have the results from it. You just need to forward that out. That's what's happening with lab services. And I don't get an override on it. Neither does Mary, neither does anyone in Medicare, because it's written into that way by the Medicare manuals and it's written in by CMS. And I gave you that laboratory section down there. So hopefully that'll help you out a little bit if you need that. One other, and this is again a reminder, and I know I've said this a lot, y'all, but I will continue to say it because it is one of the biggest issues. Never ever set anything that's looking for a payment until after 30 days. Yes, 14 days is the first day we can process an electronic claim, and yes, 28 days is the first day we can process a paper claim. However, we do have 30 days to process a clean claim. What that means is it's not that the claim doesn't hit for edits and audits, it's that we aren't sending you an additional documentation request. So our system may take longer than 14 or 28 days because of that. It's hitting a variety of edits and audits and we're working them. We're moving them through, yeah, we got this. Oh, yeah, we got that. That's great. The problem is you didn't wait 30 days. So it's not an automatic 14 or 28 days. It's not that. It has to be 30. Okay. So hopefully that kind of helps everyone understand why I keep bringing up the payment floor. I brought this up briefly because of a question that was asked. Actually, there was more than one, but I'm going to summarize them all into one, and hopefully this will register with everyone that asked these questions. One, they said, you keep getting a duplicate, but you're not getting it in the system. Well, so my assumption is the pre-pass edit report. Another form of that question was it's never showing in the system to even duplicate again what's going on. And again, we're going to look at that pre-pass edit report. Now, what we have to do with that is check two different reports. One, the 999 report, which is given to the electronic data interchange submitter who sent us the claim electronically. The 999 report simply acknowledges we got it. The next day, that same submitter has access to what's called a 277 CA report. That is what tells them whether the claim took it or not. So did the claim go into the system? Did the system like it? It can reject a single claim. It can reject an entire batch of claims, or it can take the whole thing. Just depends on what happens. So I think that's what's happening based on what I was able to gather from the questions. Okay. Somebody did ask a question about automatically submitting, and I'm going to assume that they're using a vendor or AI to do this, and that what happens is after so many program days, it just sends it in. And does Medicare technically allow this? Yes, we will take those claims in. We are still going to run them through the audits and edits to see if they're one in processing. If they're in processing, why are you resubmitting that? Why aren't you waiting until that process and get an answer? Two, we're going to look at any claims that are submitted but not paid. Again, those could be in processing, those could be applied to deductible, those could be paid by a primary insurance or a variety of other reasons. So we'll check that. And that's what we mean by check the status. So if you do that as well as we do that, hopefully we'll be able to avoid those. Okay. All of this is kind of wrapped together in an article, and it's called the Common Claim Denials article. I just want to click on it right here, and by click on it, it is a link. It's an active hyperlink. And then what it has is a variety of different types of denials within it, and one of those is duplicate. So let's go ahead and just open it up. What it will do is automatically open the WPS website. And that it comes into the common claim denials. You can search for that right up here in the top. It'll bring it up. It is applicable to all processing systems. That's what this jurisdiction is telling us. Okay. I do happen to have the FIS system selected right now. Part A line of business. I could go to the Part B. It didn't change anything. If you're looking for this article and you're like, I don't really want to search, I'm not sure that's going to help me, that's fine. What we'd like you to do is come right back up to the top of the screen. You're going to come back to the first page, WPSGHA.com. Topic Center, Claims. Once you're in claims, you can use the A to Z list, specialty or topic, whatever you want to do. You can filter, and I didn't even finish filtering. You can see it automatically brought it up. Common claim denials, and there it is again. Just a couple of different ways to get to the same thing, okay? So here's what we're looking for. I'm just going to scroll down a little bit. Here's the header. Explains a little bit more about what we got. And then it does talk about how we allow things we did want to do. Um, what would happen if we had this. So different items like that. Okay. The last slide, and I'm going to jump back to the slide deck. The last slide that I have in here is just some more information. People have asked us questions about direct data entry, and they're not a Part A biller, which means you don't bill on a UB04 or the 837I. It doesn't apply to you, but if you want to know more, you can use the link to get there. The CMS SecureNet Access Portal user manual will walk you through all of the different functions. It has step-by-step directions and includes some pictures. The operating guide, I always take everyone to the overview, and then you can get into the operating guide whether you want it section by section or whether you want the full one. The nice thing about the overview is that both sides of the operating guide, both processing systems, you can actually get to either one that way. CMS website for the National Correct Coding Initiative. Remember, I talked about that, and I said, hey, if this service is something that incorporates or is part of another service, some information there. Skilled nursing facility consolidated billing. Again, this is a form of overlapping, which is also a type of duplicate, and you want to make sure that you're following these. And then the physician fee schedule. If y'all want to see any of these resources or you want me to go through any of them, I do ask that you put a comment in the chat. Otherwise, I'm just going to assume that you're good and that you don't need me to go through a lot of extra information. And you say, well, why do I do that? Well, I do that so I can answer the questions that you sent in already, and then go ahead and read through those questions in the chat. So, what happens and why do the first question is, why do some claims have an X in the tape-to-tape field? They understood that there are some that happens, but why does this do that? And this is based on the contractor edits and when it rejects and denies. So what happens is if it doesn't go to the common working file and you're looking in DDE, when did that happen? Was it before the common working file edit or after? And that's really what makes the difference there. You may not always know that, and that's why you have to look at that tape to tape field in direct data entry to determine that. The next question is, should you do an appeal or a reopening? Look, it really just depends on what you're trying to do with it, right? A reopening is great. It can get you through a lot more information, as an example. But oh, I'm sorry, not but, and it also has a longer time frame. A reopening can occur 1 year from the date of service, the date of denial, the date of whatever. So the processing or adjudication date, it's 1 year from that. An appeal you have 120 days for. Now, a reopening is a once and done. An appeal, on the other hand, has 5 levels, and each one has certain criteria to meet. So which one would you prefer? Well, it's completely up to you. But also remember that a reopening can actually cause different appeal rights to be applied because you reopened it, you added something on there, and now you get new appeal rights. So I don't really know where to go with that one any more than that. Lots of information and intricate components of it, but definitely take a look and help me understand it. If there's something more you want, I'd love to be able to help you out a little bit more. Um, how to avoid dismiss HCFA claims that had went to Medicare with the incorrect PS account on it. Now, first, HCFA, which would be the CMS 1500 claim form, We don't void those claims. We don't dismiss those claims. What you have to do is send us a notice, and it's an overpayment notice. I'm going to go through that in just a moment because I want to make sure you get the right thing. And you have to tell us this was wrong. Then you have to submit a claim with the correct information. That's how the MCS system has to be completed. Now, as I said, what are you going to do with that? And I'm going to scroll back up on my website, wpsgha.com. We're going to go to tools this time. Inside tools, I'm going to go to all tools. And then I like the all forms list. You can go to different topic centers to find the forms. I just prefer this one, my preference. When I get down through the all forms list, what I'm looking for is something called overpayment. That's what a duplicate will result in, which is what they're talking about in this case. And then I have to see, what am I doing? Well, you're going to notify us of an overpayment, or you're going to send a check. So you can send us a check, or you can ask us to set up the overpayment and then send you information so that you can respond back to that. It just depends on what you want. Complete this. So read through all of the information on the form. Okay. Stop. Make sure that you read this section, which is breaking down of the form. These three fields are commonly completed incorrectly, which can cause other issues and claims to be taken back or actual duplicates of claims. It's just messy. So please make sure you get these three fields correctly. I'm going to go ahead and jump into the download because I do want to show them to you and make sure that you have a full understanding. Okay, so these are the three forms I was talking about right up at the top. The contract is one of two, J5 or J8. Are you in Iowa, Kansas, Missouri, Nebraska? Or are you in Indiana and Michigan? If you say to me, well, I mean, I know I have WPS, but I bill on a UBO4 or an 837I, but I'm not in any of those four states, default to J5. Okay. Then you're going to go over to Medicare type. Now, Medicare type refers to the contract under which CMS defines this benefit or defines this claim. MCS is Part B. Part A is FIS. Then you put the state that the claim processed for or in Missouri, Iowa, any of those. Could be Indiana, could be Michigan. That's what you want there. And then fill out the rest of the form. Now, again, if you're not attaching a check, you don't need to fill this part out. And this will then help us, if you don't fill it out, to indicate that you do know that you're not attaching a check. And by the way, you're voluntarily disclosing that you need this refund. And that means that, hey, we should take the money back from you, which means we'll send you a notice. If, on the other hand, you are attaching a check, you do want to make sure that you put that information down here. So those are the questions that we get quite a lot with that. So I wanted to make sure we were okay with that. Somebody else asked about the same process, and they said, is there an electronic version? And the answer is absolutely. Come into the portal user manual right here, and this is, again, the WPSGHA website. We're just going to go into the portal user manual. When we scroll down, you're going to want to get below practices and patient information. You're going to come to transactions. Okay? We're going to scroll down and find the one that we need. Oh, I'm sorry, you're going to come to finance, which that makes sense. And you're going to say, I want a refund. And then you're going to be able to do the overpayment search, the payment status, all of those different things. What are you trying to do? Okay. So it really depends. Now, the reason that I should have stopped here under transactions is that overpayment claim adjustment form that I just went through, it translates to this form right here electronically if you're not sending a check, and this form if you are sending a check, are you attaching money or not? So hopefully all of that makes sense. Which leads me to the actual point where someone said, how do I research or find the original claim? Look, if it's a duplicate and you're not sure what the original claim is, I do have to have you come in and, use your claim status feature right here. See if you can work through that and see if you can figure it out. If ultimately it's duplicating and you cannot find it and you've done your research, you do want to contact customer service. You do want to indicate that you know this is a duplicate. You've checked DDE and SNAP. You can't find it. It shouldn't be duplicating to anything. Now you have a question. They'll look into it for you. But you do have to be able to indicate that you've done your self-service tools first. All right. That's my last pre-submitted question. We're going to go to Mary now and see what questions we've got in the chat.
Thanks, Tom, for all that great information. The first question comes up, and I think you really touched upon it by just mentioning what you just did, but the question is, why would the claim deny as a duplicate? This would be an ambulance claim, Tom, when modifiers are RH and then the second trip would be a different modifier, like an HH. Can you comment on that, how there might be a claim in the
Sure.
system or maybe one already processed? Some things
Mhm.
to think about.
So things to think about with this one. Remember I said there's two different duplicate categories. One is an exact match, which means it would be RH to RH. The other one is a suspected match. That's what an RH and the second claim being an H to H for the ambulance will hit against. We still suspect that this wasn't two different services. Now, this has been determined that due to the volume of these claims and due to the amount of information, please, I don't know who determines this. It's some mathematical, statistical formula they use. I can't answer that. What they do is they say, okay, what's the best way to do this? And the best way to do this is to file an appeal and have you prove that you have two different services, whether it's an exact or almost exact, close to match, right? That's how the process works for ambulance claims. So I'm not sure what else you're looking for there. You may need to put a little bit more information, but remember, you have to keep in mind how Medicare the system works, right? We do have the exact and we have similar. This is a similar claim. It looks similar to us because it has an ambulance transport code. It has a mileage code, it has a base rate mileage code, and an ambulance modifier. That's what's happening with that one. So we'll go ahead and move on to the next question if there is one.
Okay, there is just one other question, and I'm not really certain what the learner is asking about. I did ask for some more information or to expand on the question, so maybe that'll come in, Tom. But the learner is just asking if you can talk about the vendor auto submit again.
Yeah, I definitely can. I'll give you some pretty brief information, but like Mary said, this is kind of could be a bigger answer. I'm not sure where they're looking for. Here's some basic things. When you hire a vendor, look at your contract with that vendor. Does the vendor contract say they submit every 7 days? Doesn't matter who they're submitting to, they submit every 7 days. You may even be paying them to submit claims every 7 days. But what did we learn in this class? How long does it take for Medicare to process a clean claim? It's either going to be 14, 28, or 30, what it takes, or sometime between 14 and 30. So if you're submitting every 7 days, by the way, you may not have gotten the second claim and that vendor is submitting and charging you for that. So when you look at the vendor portion of it, it really is dependent upon what your vendor is doing and what they're looking for. So again, it's a bit hard to actually explain that other than to say check your vendor contracts, figure out how often they submit. Are they charging you per claim? Is their follow-up included in their initial charge or is it a separate charge? Are they using AI? And does that AI then program correctly for the Medicare amounts? Now, keep in mind, different insurance companies may say, hey, I can pay this on day 2, and this one says I can pay it on day 20. So what are you doing to meet all of those different requirements? That's what we talk about when we talk about vendor auto submits. So hopefully that does help answer the question a little bit. Okay, anything else, Mary?
That's it, Tom.
All right, perfect. Guess what, y'all? We're gonna wrap it right up here and we'll get on with it. So I want to remind everybody, and this is the opportunity for you guys to take this survey. Mary's gonna put a link in the chat. She's already done it a couple of times, I'm sure. I want to remind you that I will give you the link when I close out of the webinar. It's gonna look like the top box. It says external site. It's got that little triangle on it. It's the same exact link Mary's putting there in there for you now. Also, we'll give it to you a couple more times. Third time it comes to you is in the survey. I'm sorry, in the email after the event. So, along with your certificate, you'll get a link to say, if you haven't given us feedback, please do so. Last, if you're watching this as an encore, you can still take the survey and you'll look for this picture. It's on the bottom, online survey, little finger pointing out there. Those are all the ways to take the survey. Please, it's a very short survey. There are 4 or 5 questions, and then you can elect to take more. You don't have to, but you can elect to. CMS is really looking for that feedback. They like to hear from you, so do we. So I want to make sure you take the time to do that. It will only take you a couple of minutes. All right, as a reminder, and I've said this a couple of times, you're going to get an email. The email will be a follow-up email. Don't delete it. Open it up. It contains your certificate, especially if you need CEUs, you'll have contact hours. Important to make sure you keep that. We don't control what your governing body does to get those contact hours or to translate those contact hours into CEU, so you need to contact them. So make sure it's there for you. Um, Give you 7 days. The next 7 days, if you come up with a question, please feel free to email us. We're good. That email address is in the chat. It's wps.gha.education@wpsic.com. Make sure you put duplicate webinar or duplicates webinar or duplicates or something like that in the subject line just to make sure I get it. We're either going to email you back directly or we're going to create a response and send it out to everybody. We're more likely to email you back directly, but just giving you a couple of options. Same email address for those of you that dialed in but did not join me via the web portion. Same email address, wps.gha.education@wpsic.com. Again, same subject line. The difference is in the body, can you please put need a certificate and here's my phone number. Your phone number must be 10 digits. 10 digits. All right, that's all I got for you today. Thanks for attending. We hope that you got something out of it. You may now disconnect and you have a great day. Bye, everybody.